All right. Hello, everyone. This is take two in my video journey or series, whatever you want to call it. This is also like take eight of me trying to do this video. The reason is because I already recorded it once and watched it through and felt like I wanted a little bit more structure for this one. So I actually wrote down some notes that I'll be going through. I know it looks like a mess. It still, I'll try to keep it as linear as possible and get straight through it. And without wasting too much time, as a quick update on yesterday, I did end up going to the gym, but I bitched out. Of course, I didn't even realize this until I got there, but it was January 4th. You know, it was just after New Year's. And let me close OBS real quick because I felt like I kept looking at OBS. I'm going to talk to you when I'm recording this. But it was January 4th. So everybody had set their New Year's resolutions. They're all at the gym working out. So, of course, there was like a bunch of people there. And I was like, I just don't feel comfortable. And I know I sat there and talked about not letting it get to me or not worrying about what people think. But I did, and I cracked. And again, that goes back to me being a flawed person and why I think it is so important for me to be healthier. I can't emphasize that enough. But anyways, today I have only eaten some of these popcorner chips, if you guys know what those are, kind of a light little snack. And with that, I had a can of Diet Coke. I felt like it was better than regular Coke, but at the same time, I feel like if you're drinking soda, whether it's diet or regular, you're still kind of prolonging the addiction to soda or drinking something like sweet other than water. And so I still don't feel too good about that, but otherwise, all I've had to eat besides that, the popcorners, is some chicken fried rice. And this was chicken fried rice that I made, pretty light, with some like green beans and some green onions. And so that was really good. And other than that, I've just been drinking water. So that's been good. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and dive straight into what I have here today because this is truly so important to me, and I would appreciate if anybody who's taking the time to watch this video and actually listen to what I have to say today, please leave a comment down below and tell me what you think about the points that I'm laying out here today. Because again, this story, this commentary, this idea is extremely important to me, and I think it's important that everyone at least consider this. And so I'm curious what everybody else thinks. And so without further ado, I'm just going to kind of dive straight into my little script here. So to start, this is largely coming from my experience in IT. I've been working in IT for about 4 years now. Back when I was a kid, my grandparents used to have this it was called a Compaq computer, but it was spelled COMPAQ. And it was like this old like CRT monitor, and I used to play these old Jumpstart like kids games on them, and like Nickelodeon Splash or something like that, and this old Cartoon Network game. Later on, I got a laptop, and then in 2015, I built my first computer. My friend helped me build it, kind of showed me the ropes, and at that point, I was kind of hooked, fell in love with gaming on PC, and slowly started to get more into IT until I landed my first job about 4 years ago. Did that for about 2.5 years after going through college and studying in college some. And at that point, I transitioned into the job where I'm at now, working in a cybersecurity company, and I've had a lot of exposure to, like, over this short amount of time, really, to see just how involved and integral technology is in the infrastructure of our everyday lives. So, like, what am I getting at, right? So, like, every transaction that you make, when you go to a restaurant, and you hand your waiter the bill, it's paid for with a transaction, like a POS system. It's technology that allows that to happen. When you pay with Apple Pay, that's technology. When you store your credit card, your email, all of that data and information is technology. And for a lot of people, it's kind of like water under the bridge. It's like, I've heard a lot of people argue against the whole data argument. People in IT like to say, like, don't use like apps like TikTok and stuff because they're farming your data. Truth is, all these companies are farming your data. We know that. And thus the kind of cultural response has been like, who cares? I don't care if people take my data. They can take it all, But at the same time, I think there's still a point to be made at just how integral this is to our everyday lives, whether we choose to like accept that, realize that, or not, right? Um, so the next kind of piece that I have here is tech in politics. So the first thing that I have here, and really kind of before I get into that, where this is coming from, where this is going, is when you start mixing technology and using technology to enforce politics, that's when you start getting into a dangerous kind of ball game. You know, when you look at what's happening with censorship on Twitter, and you see people's accounts getting shut down. I don't even use Twitter myself, but it's like all over the news and like on Google and on YouTube. Like people are talking about it, and not to mention, you know, how Google's search engine works. You know, it has changed drastically. When you search something on Google, your first results are heavily filtered through people who come to Google, whether it's through political relations or financial relations, and ensure that what you see on that first page, which I mean, just for the purpose of this video, 99% of people only click on something from the first page of a Google search. They don't go to the second page. You know, and so when that whole first page is, I won't say compromised, but it's filled with this clutter of things that are kind of leveraged to be there, they're not authentically there as you might think they are, that's when things start getting a little bit dangerous. And so to kind of give an example too, something that I actually looked up was what's happening in Canada. Apparently, the government ordered banks to freeze the private bank accounts of protesters against the federal government's contested COVID-19 policies. So basically, you know, these people are protesting against the whether it's the vaccine mandates or just any of these COVID policies. It doesn't matter necessarily what it is. It's if you disagree, you know, your bank gets frozen, right? And then and then I have here as well frozen bank accounts, frozen assets, like I mentioned earlier, censorship, and I don't really need to mention the whole social credit thing in China, but I still put that there just to kind of give you some sense of perspective. A lot of people like to think, oh, it's happening in that country, so it couldn't happen here. I'd really be careful about how you kind of guide that, because yes, we're completely different economics, completely different government structure, completely different infrastructure, completely different culture. At the same time, like that doesn't mean that control or, you know, again, I'll just kind of wait and get through the rest of these points here because I don't want to get too much into the weeds with it. I feel like I'm already in the weeds enough as it is. But the next piece I have here is tech and biology. So one example, my favorite example among this list is I saw a couple years ago the military was testing they were experimenting these eye augmentations that seemed to make the people's eyes kind of similar to a cat's. It was a form of night vision. And this was a way for people in the military to be able to see at night just with their own eyes. And this is something that's real. Again, and before I go on with anything else here, I advise, you know, if you're curious about anything I'm talking about, any of the sources for this information, I hope to get to a point where I can put this information in a nice, beautiful presentation. But for now, I'm just kind of speaking naturally from the heart and with what I have taken the time to write down here from my mind. But I just want you guys to really do that research for yourself and come to your own conclusions. And again, you can come back to this video and let me know what you think, because I'm curious what opinions you guys have. So the next one I have here is like prosthetics. We've already seen in robotics how people are being able to make those hands that can grab and move based on your neural stimulations, I suppose, the neural signals rather, maybe to your hands. And so that stuff is kind of amazing, but also augmented reality and VR there. So that's a little bit less biology, but also it's perceptive. You know, you put on this headset, it alters your perception. So in a way, that's kind of your biology, your vision, we'll say, but just kind of falling under that same thing. And then lastly, the RFID kind of chips that people are already putting inside of their bodies that are allowing them to do transactions. They have their bank account on there. They have their personal identification, maybe their passport, maybe their medical information. I'm not really sure how far this goes currently, but I know that at least what I've mentioned so far is, in fact, things that are out there. Again, I encourage you to do your own research on these things. So the next kind of point here, the next kind of point of interest, we'll say, is something like Neuralink, right? You look at Neuralink, and let's see here. It's integrated with the mind, right? So I don't know whether or not this is intended. It's hard. Personally, I haven't done a lot of research into Neuralink. I don't know if this is something that's designed to allow you to see things, like if it's going to have a psychological impact, if it could, augment what you see, if it could augment what you hear. I don't know the psychological extent of something like Neuralink, but even when you just hear the word Neuralink, you're talking about like your neurology, right? So like I would assume this has to do with your nerves, which is very dependent on your brain, and it's linked through technology. And so I really think when you think about something like Neuralink, you're looking at this idea of having benefits with mental and psychological performance, right? So like maybe it'll be something where you have this chip inside of you and you can think more effectively, you can think more clearly, you can memorize things better. Maybe you have like this almost internal hard drive that you can access for remembering things. I think maybe that's a little far-fetched, but I'm not exactly sure what the current intentions are for Neuralink. But just assuming that it can have some kind of psychological impact, even just fast forwarding 5 or 10 years, these are all things that I think the integration between technology and human biology is capable of. Right? So with that, this next point here is really important. So if you consider even Neuralink, which again is here today, right? I'm talking about kind of two different things at the same time, so I'll try to be more clear on that. We're talking about where we're at today with Neuralink and with current worldly circumstances, but then we're also talking about where we could be, let's say, 20 years from now. Even maybe realistically, I'll just say 10 years from now, because, even something like the iPhone developed extremely quickly, right? So if you imagine even now with the Neuralink, if you're really implanting something into people's minds that's integrated with their neurology, I don't know why I was saying spinal cord there. If it's integrated with your neurology or with your brain waves or with your brain at all, your brain functions, your psychology, surely something like this would have to have government regulation. It would have to have some kind of approval. When you look at something like your food that you eat when you go to the grocery store, when you're going to McDonald's and you get your burger or what have you, that food is FDA approved, right? So it's approved to be safe for you to consume so that it doesn't kill you, so that it doesn't make you, immediately fall asleep while you're driving. That's what these agencies and these rules are here for, right? Same thing goes for any drugs that are prescribed to you. If it's a medically prescribed drug, it has to be approved by the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA. And so these things are guaranteed to be safe for you because they have so much impact on the human biology. We'll just leave it there. Let's see, where am I? So with this idea of government regulation, this is going to be something that they're going to have oversight over. And with that being said, you're going to have to put your trust in the government, essentially, or whatever agency, which ultimately is going to operate under government funding. You're going to have to, trust this agency to make sure that, in an audit, to make sure that no poor practices are being used on humans through these vectors such as Neuralink or what have you. And I think you may even find that there are some agreements that they make in terms of the control that they want to have or that they need to have to be able to audit these things. They need to have logs of what's happening. And so therefore, I think, you're looking at this idea of like, we have to keep you safe, right? That's what they want to say. We got to do this to keep you safe. So the next page here that I have is moving on to kind of the I feel like is the kicker to this whole presentation, if you will. So here, let's just kind of recap with where we're at, right? You have something like Neuralink. Let's assume that Neuralink in its current form, or in the next 10 years, let's go 10 years from now, let's assume that we have the ability to augment or modify human psychology via a device or technology that integrates with the human brain. I don't think that's too far-fetched. And then immediately, I think everything beyond this point isn't hypothetical. Once you get here, this is required for us to get here in the first place. Once we get to that point that this technology is available and it begins going out to the public, it's going to be regulated by the government. At which point you have to put your trust in the government to keep you safe and to make sure that there's not any funny business going on. And we'll kind of get to that. So the next piece I have here is the culture. So this is where I think this gets scary. So if you look at what happened with COVID, right? And I'm trying as hard as I can to stay away from any conspiracy, demonetization, YouTube blacklisting topics that I can. But if you look at what happened with COVID, there was certainly this social pressure. You had all these people on the news telling you that you had to get the vaccine to protect mom and dad, to protect grandma, to protect the immunocompromised. You had to do this. At my old place of work, and especially at the time, even like on apps like Tinder and dating apps, vaccinated was like a profile that people put on their dating app. And at work it was like weird, if you didn't want to wear your mask, that's one thing, wear the mask, whatever. But if you didn't want to get vaccinated, now you're a conspiracy theorist. Now you're a little weird, right? So there was definitely this social pressure around the vaccine. And even my company, what I was going to say earlier is they were doing testing. If you didn't have the vaccine, you had to do a test every so often, and you couldn't come into the office unless you had been tested at first it was 2 weeks, then it was every week. And so it just felt like it was getting tighter and tighter. It was a very trying time. And so again, all this stuff that you're seeing in the media, all these people that are saying it's safe. Oh, you're stupid if you speak out against this. Back then, if you thought that this stuff came from a lab instead of coming from the pangolins in Wuhan or the bats in Wuhan, you were a conspiracy theorist. And so there was social pressure for people to get the vaccine. Okay, so you've got it, right? I got the vaccine. In the same way, I think that you may have social pressures for people to have this kind of implant placed in their head. Why is that? Well, because maybe in the corporate world, you might be seen as not as valuable as an employee who has this chip in their head. Well, it makes them more productive. It helps them focus better. Maybe they're more effective or cognitive when they're on the job. Maybe when you're in college or when your kids are in school, they're performing significantly better because their minds are augmented by these chips, right? It will almost be where if you don't have it, you're at a disadvantage. You're not working as hard. You're not as valuable, right? I'm not trying to say that you'll be weird. I'm not trying to say that you'll be an outcast. Maybe people won't judge you for that. But at the very least, you quite literally might not be seen as valuable because you're not able to have the same augmentation that all these other people do and is provided by a regulated government backed by science. And also, they might try to say that this is better for security. You know, if they can monitor every person to make sure, you know, if they can see like who's a threat, or if they can see, you know, the I'll save that. I'll save that. But the last piece I have here is that it'll be popular. It'll be mainstream. You know, you'll see your friend get it, and the next thing you know, your other friend gets it, and then maybe your mom gets it, your dad gets it, your sister gets it, your brother gets it, and now you're like, man, like, and they're enjoying it, they're loving it. Like, dude, it's so cool. You don't understand. Like, this is revolutionary, you know. And at that point, you're like, I feel like I have to get it. So this is again where it starts to kind of get scary. So at this point, my last piece here is control. Who's to say that once this chip has been inserted into your mind, that they can't, let's say they assume you're a criminal, you stole something, and they just shut you down, put you to sleep, unconscious, and they know where you are. They track you. I think that's a point that I should have written down earlier, maybe in the culture part, but I guess this is perfect in control. I don't know why I didn't think about this earlier. They track you. You know, a lot of people, I get, you know, this is coming together perfectly, honestly. One of my points here is ignorance is bliss. A lot of people say, you know, let's back up a little bit. Right now, a lot of places farm your data. Well, who cares? Who cares that they farm my data? Sure. Who cares that they track what I'm doing? Sure. But when you have a chip in your head, you know, it's one thing when they're tracking your phone. And there's this idea that, you know, the phone is not me. This is my phone. This is me. But when this is inside of you, you know, what are you going to, are you going to feel as safe turning your phone on airplane mode or turning your phone off to assume that you can't be tracked? If this is in my head, if I turn it off, even in my head, I still genuinely believe there's going to be an element of this being something that can be tracked. But furthermore, you know, who's to say that they can't just shut you down if you disagree? If you speak out against, if you have the wrong political view, if you don't align with the right political party, they just put you to sleep. They shut you down. They kill you. You know, this is where I'm totally deep into the weeds, and I'm willing to accept that. But I think it's hard once you go through all of these realistic kind of pieces here. It's hard to imagine that this is not where we're headed. I know that this sounds like a lot of doom and gloom, and I know that I certainly have my own bias. But I encourage everybody to speak for themselves. But I encourage everybody to think for themselves. I'm sorry, I'm getting tired. But I encourage everybody to think for themselves. Because this information is an opinion. It is my perspective on some things that are out there, some things that are in my head. It's a nice mix of the two. But I also think that there's just enough plausibility to it to where it could be very, very, very realistic. And it's a natural course of progression. You know, again, we can see things that happen through history, even things that are as recent as a couple years ago, that lead to this natural path of where we're headed right now. And again, there's enough pieces of this puzzle that are already in place that I think the image that the puzzle forms in totality becomes clear before we've even placed them all together. And I think that's going to go ahead and wrap this up, honestly. Some last notes here are how do you organically audit government activity /actions with Neuralink or something like that? So again, You put in something like an FDA to monitor the activity of the government regulating, or tracking or whatever they do to keep you safe, whatever they do to oversee this. When those audits go through, how are you really going to be able to audit that? There's going to have to be a lot of stuff put in place for that. I'm assuming that would have to be put in place prior to this being rolled out to the public, but definitely a key point there. And then also, again, last piece here, if you don't have it, you're not as valuable. If you do, you constantly have a back door at all times. I think, again, this is extremely important as just a thought experiment, because Neuralink and psychological augmentation are things that are real. They're happening right now. They're being developed right now. AI has come significantly far with things like the DALL-E project on OpenAI and ChatGPT that's literally like writing essays and solving coding problems for like technical programmers way smarter than me, way smarter, like so intelligent, and they're cracking those little issues for those people. And so I don't think it's too unlikely to think that this is where we're headed. So anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you made it this far, again, please leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. I'm curious to hear what everybody has to say about something like this, because I think, honestly, I feel like this is where we're headed. But anyways, guys, thank you again, and we'll see you in the next one.